Senator Rafferty, we are live.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the 130th Maine State Legislature. This is actually our second session. My name is Joe Rafferty, and I am the Senate co-chair of the Committee of Education and Cultural Affairs. This morning, we are going to be in a public hearing. Prior to getting to that hearing, I'd like to give my committee members an opportunity to introduce themselves and also give you a heads up that it's quite possible committee members start with us and then it's necessary for them to leave and potentially return. Those that aren't present may enter at some point, and I'll give them an opportunity to introduce themselves. It's a very busy week for us as we have much legislation that we're dealing with. In any case, first, like to give Senator Woodson a chance to introduce himself.
Thank you, sir. Dave Woodson, District 33. It's a windy, beautiful March morning in northwestern York County.
Thank you, sir. And Representative Crockett.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, everyone. Ed Crockett from District 43, which is part of Portland and part of Falmouth.
Thank you. Representative Dodge.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My name is Jan Dodge. I represent House District 97, which is Belfast, Northport, and Waldo in Waldo County. Good morning, everyone.
Thank you. Representative Lyman.
Good morning, Sheila Lyman, District 74, which is Jay, Livermore Falls, and part of Livermore. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative McCray.
Good morning. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm Dave McCray. I'm at my home in Fort Fairfield in the center of Aroostook County, and I represent the people of District 148. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Representative Roach.
Good morning, everyone. Representative Tim Roach, District 7 Wells.
Thank you. And Representative Sampson.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Heidi Sampson on this lovely Wednesday. I just read the Winnie the Pooh book to my grandkids. It's Wednesday, not Tuesday, but Wednesday. Anyway, you'll have to read the book to understand what I'm saying. I represent the good people of House District 21, Alfred, Limerick, Shapley, Newfield, and Parsonsfield.
And it is a blustery day. Representative Stearns.
Good morning. My name is Paul Stearns. I represent House District 119 in Piscataquis County.
Thank you very much. And working with us is our committee clerk, Eli Murphy. Morning, Eli. Eli will assist folks that are coming in to testify. And as you make that transition, most of you have been through this practice for a little bit. There may be a lull in the action as you make your transfer from the audience to participant, but he'll get you there. We have Hillary Risler as our committee analyst. Hillary will oftentimes have to step in and keep us on track in terms of procedure and so forth, and comes in big, mostly in work sessions, but she'll add as much as we need this morning. Folks, I'm going to ask that we keep in mind the only committee protocol really we like to hold to is that we are guests in one another's home, and please keep that in mind as we interact throughout the morning. We appreciate that. So I'll call the work session. I'm sorry, public hearing on LD 1727. We will open that hearing, and that is an act concerning sexual misconduct on college campuses. And I will try to, let's see, we have our sponsor, President Jackson, with us this morning.
Good morning. Morning, Senator Rafferty, Representative Brennan, esteemed members of the Joint Standing Committee on Education and Cultural Affairs. My name is Troy Jackson. Have the honor of representing the good people of Northern Aroostook County in Senate District 1, and the privilege of serving as the president of the Maine Senate. I'm here to introduce LD 1727, an act concerning sexual misconduct on college campuses. No one, let alone a college student, should have to worry about sexual violence. However, the truth is that sexual assault is an all too common occurrence on college campuses. All you have to do is look at the data on sexual violence, listen to the stories of survivors, or talk to any college student. It represents an ugly stain on our education system, and I believe that we can do more as lawmakers to eradicate this trend. That's why I partnered with a group of Maine college students to introduce LD 1727, an act concerning sexual misconduct on college campuses. Other states were exploring ways to better support students, and those college students thought it was high time for Maine to do the same. The need for the bill is clear. 1 in 5 Mainers experience sexual assault at some point during their lifetime. That equates to approximately 14,000 Mainers each year. According to the Association of American Universities, 20% of female undergraduates are victims of sexual assault or sexual misconduct. Other studies have found sexual assault with males as well, but at a lower percentage. What's more troubling is that the numbers are really likely higher. To quote a study from the University of Maine, not only do a large percentage of rapes go unreported to authorities, nearly a third of the victims, according to one analysis, don't even share their experiences with anyone, not even a close friend or family member. It's no surprise that this traumatic experience takes a toll on survivors. Half of adult survivors in Maine experience depression, and more than 1/3 report being diagnosed with anxiety disorder. All of this highlights the need to do more to prevent sexual violence and invest in long-term resources to support survivors. No one should have to go through this alone or fear that there will be repercussions for reporting violence. LD 1727 seeks to tackle these issues head on. The bill includes evidence-based prevention and trauma response training annually for students and employees, and it creates an advisory commission that includes the Department of Education, the Department of Health and Human Services, members of advocacy organizations, students, representatives from post-secondary schools, and experienced researchers. This commission will create a biennial climate survey to increase transparency, measure progress, and improve policy decisions in Maine's institutions of higher learning. Perhaps the most important aspect of the proposed legislation is the ongoing support services gained through the confidential resource advisors. These advisors can be either employees of the institution or partners from a sexual or domestic violence support center. LD 1727 is the result of a year-long effort led by Maine college students and the Every Voice Coalition. Since the group approached me in December of 2020 about sponsoring this bill, they have worked diligently to draft legislation to better support survivors and create a safe learning environment on campus. This bill has gone through a lengthy stakeholder process, and the amended version reflects input and feedback from a wide variety of organizations and individuals. Though this legislation is unique to Maine, it includes several provisions that have passed with strong bipartisan support in other states, including our neighbors, New Hampshire, Massachusetts, and Connecticut. And in addition, 2 other states that aren't in the Northeast. Before I close, I want to thank all the students that have worked on this legislation and the students who are bravely sharing their experiences with you today. For many of these students, living on campus represents their first experience living away from home. I think that we can all agree that we must do our part to ensure that Maine colleges and universities are a safe place for students to learn and prepare for the workforce. Thank you for your time this morning. I hope you'll join me in supporting LD 1727. I just want to say that I did come at this probably not understanding, really as much of the problem as some people that actually have to deal with it on a frequent basis. I think the students here in Maine and some of the leaders from other campaigns in other states really went out of their way to try and take considerations in for the universities and other groups. I mean, I think they bent over backwards to try and make this a bill that everyone could support. I don't know that we're 100% there, but it's not because they didn't try. I think the issues that they brought forward are real. There's a problem. I think this could help immensely. And I think that they are the people that are experiencing this firsthand. And I really learned a lot from their stories and the issues they brought forward. And I hope the committee does the same thing. Listens to the people that actually happen to go through that right at the moment. Obviously, there's people that went through it, has gone through in the past, and I would definitely say the same thing for them also. That these experiences are real and they're firsthand knowledge that you're going to have today. So with that, I'll take any questions and look forward to the committee's work on the bill.
Thank you, sir. Do we have any questions of President Jackson at this time, folks? Seeing none, sir, we just want to thank you for bringing the bill forward and for your testimony and time with us this morning. Have a good day. Eli, I don't know if anyone gave you a preferred speaking order. I do see that we have Representative Osher is on the list. And any additional representatives or legislators, we'd follow, but I'd go with Representative Osher next up, please, if we could. And then if not, we'll work from there.
I was just being pulled in electronically. Did you say something to me?
No, just good morning.
Oh, thank you. Good morning.
You're all set.
All right, thank you. Good morning, Senator Rafferty and Representative Brennan and the esteemed members of the Joint Standing Committee on Education and Cultural Affairs. My name is Lori Osher. I represent House District 123, that's the majority of Orono's residents and the campus of the University of Maine. I'm here today to testify in support of LD 1727, an act concerning sexual misconduct on college campuses, as the bill's lead co-sponsor. Across the US, sexual violence disproportionately harms women and LGBTQ people. Sexual violence negatively impacts the lives of the victims, and for some, the physical and emotional scars can last a lifetime. At institutions of higher education, sexual violence is a persistent problem. That's no secret. Someone even made a movie about it. It's called The Hunting Ground. It's a 2015 American documentary film about the incidence of sexual assault on the college campuses in the United States and the failure of college administrations to deal with it adequately. I'm glad they made the movie, but I couldn't watch it. Just too painful. Why is it painful? Well, because I was raped in college. The rapist was someone I knew. Both of us were students at Cornell University, and both of us were bicycle enthusiasts. We weren't friends. We'd see each other on the roads. When he stalked me, and he raped me. I reported his crime, and someone representing the school, a counselor, a campus police officer, I don't recall who, suggested that I should go to counseling with the perpetrator to help him process his issues. That was the extent of the response by the university. That was many decades ago. There was no policy then on Cornell's or most college campuses for how reports of sexual assault should be handled. There was no rubric for holding perpetrators accountable. There was no plan for supporting, protecting, and empowering those who experience sexual assault. But there's good news, at least for Cornell. New York passed its Enough is Enough bill in 2015. That law requires all colleges and universities in the state of New York to implement sexual assault, dating violence, domestic violence, and stalking prevention and response policies and procedures. The law also includes a data collection provision. In Maine, there is still no statewide policy. I'm grateful to President Jackson for proposing this bill, and I'm pleased to be a co-sponsor. I encourage you to support LD 1727. It's time for Maine to have this policy. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Representative. Folks, do we have any questions? Yes, Representative Crockett, please.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair, and I apologize, committee. This is not a question. I just want to thank Representative Osher for her courage in sharing her experiences. And thank you for being the major co-sponsor on this legislation.
Thank you, Representative. Any additional questions? Representative Osher, again, thank you for being here today. I know it couldn't have been easy sharing that tragic experience, but thank you for your work, and have a good afternoon.
I guess I have one more thing to say.
Yes.
When President Jackson asked me to sign on, I said, of course, addressing sexual assault on campus, and it's important. And I didn't actually even think about my own personal experience until I was writing this, because that was more than 40 years ago. And what I can say, after I submitted it, and I thought, well, there's a pattern of our institutions, all of our institutions, pushing things away that would make the institution not look so great, right? Because drawing attention to sexual assault identifies that there's a problem. And the institutions, and probably you may have included for sexual assault, but I know that in my own experience in workplaces, that the tendency is to not listen to the person who's saying that there's a problem in the institution. And that snowballs throughout our culture. And so really it's our chance to say that as leaders, we want to hold people accountable who are, in this case, violating the Title IX rights of students who are assaulted, and that they're not getting equal and fair education. So I think that as leaders, it's our job to put in policies that identify how things should be handled writ large across the state. And the survey provision, and if you compare I looked at the websites of many universities, our universities here and in the states that already have laws like this, and what they have as far as the schools pointing out what they're going to do if there was a problem are quite different. And so I think that Maine should join the group of states that are looking at this and having a statewide policy.
Thank you. Again, folks, any additional questions? Representative, thank you very much. President Jackson, again, thank you, folks. Eli, I don't have evidence of a preferred list. Are there any additional legislators?
Not that I can see, Senator.
Okay, do you want to just take them as they appear on our list? I think.
Sure. Yep.
Thank you. So Andrea Mancuso would be up next, followed by Elizabeth Ward Saxel, and Nora Gallo would be after that. Andrea? Eli?
I am working on transferring people over. My apologies.
Yeah, not a problem. I just didn't see Andrea. So we're going to hear from folks speaking for are in favor of the LD.
We can start with Elizabeth Ward Saxel, and I will work on.
Okay, great. Thank
yes.
Good morning, Elizabeth.
Good morning, Senator Rafferty and members of the committee. My name is Elizabeth Ward Saxel, and I'm with the Maine Coalition Against Sexual Assault, which represents Maine sexual assault support centers who are listed in my written testimony. We are in support of most of the sections of LD 1727 and in opposition to a couple. Many thanks to President Jackson and the student leaders for their many hours of work to bring this bill to committee. Our positions on this bill are based on decades of our providers working with hundreds of victim survivors of sexual violence on college and university campuses across Maine, with survivors who made reports to campus authorities and those who did not want a single person on campus to know what had happened to them. While we applaud the survivor-centered services and support most post-secondary institutions do currently provide, we're also aware of the shortcomings of the Title IX proceedings. In the good news column is that Pine Tree Legal, who you'll hear from later today, has a special program dedicated to supporting survivors of sexual violence across Maine, and which makes sure that student survivors have the legal counsel they need as they sort through this very complicated civil legal environment. The result is a landscape which is remarkably different from other states, and for that I'm grateful. And yet sexual violence continues to be all too common, and survivors do not always get the support they need. We strongly hope that this bill will change that. We know that 18 to 24-year-old college women are 3 times more likely than women in general to be victims of sexual violence, and that college-aged men are nearly 80% more likely than non-students of the same age to be victims. And the impact, as you have heard, can be devastating, including increased risk of suicide, not being able to finish school, and ongoing mental health challenges, among many others. What we do in this space must be done extremely carefully. We've worked with the student leaders and organizational leadership of Every Voice for more than 2 years now. I can't say enough about how inspiring the student leaders are. They're really phenomenal. I know you're going to hear from some of them today. They're strong and brave and smart, and I just really admire them. The work started with a piece of national model legislation. You know how this works, that had great intentions, but which needed a lot of tailoring to be in line with Maine law and practice. And now you have before you an amendment which is full of really groundbreaking changes, which we believe will make a real and lasting difference for victim survivors of sexual violence. And as previously noted, there are a couple of sections in the amendment before you which we believe will have very serious unintended consequences. And we would ask you to look at those very carefully. This bill has spurred an unprecedented level of collaboration between Maine's victim service providers and Maine's institutions of higher education. Because at the end of the day, those are the 2 groups of entities who will be responsible for implementing this law. We started in very different places, but today believe we have a path forward that's both ambitious and implementable. I've assumed a 3-minute time rule here. And so as a result, I realized there wasn't enough time on the 3-minute rule to go over each of the complex sections of this bill. I have included that in my testimony as well, section by section analysis, as well as a chart that outlines where the institutions and the victim services providers are with regard to each section, and a chart that outlines the major parts of the bill that have been implemented in other states and those which have not been. I would be certainly happy to try and summarize our position on each of the sections, but I also am aware that you've got 19 other humans who are going to be with you this morning. And so I just leave that up to the discretion of the chair and the committee about whether you want me to continue. And also, if you choose to do that, I would welcome the crook at any point to pull me off the stage. I will be available for the work session and would love to participate, particularly, as I said, because our organizations are oft mentioned in this bill with responsibilities, and we'd really like to be in conversation with you about how to most effectively implement this great law, what we hope will be a great law, on the ground. Thank you for your time.
I muted myself, sorry. Thank you very much. I think that that would be helpful if, I know I'd appreciate a printout of that so-called flow chart that shows the common areas as well as some of the potential differences before the work session. I think that makes great sense. I'm going to open it up for questions at this time. Hello,
And
Senator Woodson.
Mr. Chair,
Oh,
that is attached to my testimony, which is on the site, but I think I blew it once again and didn't connect it with my position. And so it's down in the bottom list of testimony, but it is there and ready for you.
Okay, so I'll be able to print that. Thank you very much. Senator Woodson, please.
Thank you, Joe. I'm not sure if this is appropriate now or for the work session. Yeah. But could you just give a brief explanation? You said groundbreaking changes in relationship to the main law is going to help this situation. Can you go over the groundbreaking changes, or again, I'll leave it up to the chair to do it now or later?
I think she has the ability to keep it fairly brief.
Okay, thank you.
All right. So there are a whole bunch of them. This bill has, I don't know, 8 or 10 sections. I haven't actually counted. One is that it would create a higher ed advisory commission, which has never existed before, to really engage the victim services and students and interested parties in designing a campus climate survey, which would be done in all college campuses across institutions of higher learning, across the state. And then the results would be looked at by the commission and recommendations made about additional changes that needed to happen. That's one huge piece. There are a significant component of requirements around awareness programming on campus, as well as additional training for the individuals who are currently involved in the disciplinary process on campus. There is a public reporting of de-identified data section that would make some of what is happening on college campuses, continue to make that available to the public in line with the current Federal Clery Act. There's an immunity provision, which would mean that, one of the barriers you'll see in my testimony is that, as you might guess, the use of drugs and alcohol are often involved when there are sexual assaults that happen. And so victims are often afraid to come forward because they're afraid they're going to get in trouble with the institution for drinking. And so there's an immunity provision, which would allow them to not be subject to disciplinary action if they're reporting a sexual assault, which is really, really cool. There's also a section that requires a memorandum of understanding between the institutions and the victim services on the ground. We currently have a lot of great relationships, but they're often dependent on 2 individuals as opposed to an institutional commitment that's ongoing. I think those are the ones off the top of my head. But as you can see, it's wide ranging in terms of mandatory training for students and campus officials. People who work on the campuses once a year. And I think that hits the ones.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Representative McCray.
Yes. Thank you for being here, Ms. Ward-Saxel. I have could you just in 30 seconds tell us the couple of issues that you feel may have unintended consequences? I'd like to have you highlight those for us.
Sure, absolutely. And I know that folks coming after me from the Maine Coalition to End Domestic Violence and Pine Tree Legal will dig into these further. I'm the non-attorney in the bunch, and so I'm at a little bit of a disadvantage. Advantage in some circles, I know, but disadvantage when really digging into the legal stuff. So one is around our concern about the adoption of policies that's required in this. There are currently extensive requirements around the way these cases are dealt with through the federal Title IX. And as I indicated in my testimony, they're not great. There have been changes in recent years that are not as victim-centered as we would certainly like them to be. But there's also the process right now of making some changes on the federal level of that. So it's sort of a shifting environment. But what we are hearing from the attorneys who we work with, who represent these students in these Title IX cases, and as well from the institutions, is they're concerned that with two sets of requirements, a state requirement and the federal requirement, that students are going to be essentially forced to go through two parallel processes, which, as you can imagine, would not be a victim-centered approach. And so, I think one of the great challenges with Title IX already is that that world is incredibly complex in terms of making reports and investigation and proceedings, and to add additional complexity really concerns us. So that's the first section that we oppose, major sections we oppose. There's one smaller one I'll speak very briefly to. The other is confidential resource officers, and they can dig more into it in the other testimony, but we know that student survivors most often share their experiences with friends rather than professional staff members. It's often a mistrust of administration and misunderstanding of the Title IX process that can make it difficult for survivors to report. And so we understand the drive to develop more easily accessible confidential resources for students. However, that section, as described, would put campus staff in a difficult position with our institutions. This provides statutory privilege. So it's actually under the rules of evidence section, court procedures. So it's over in judiciary's court as opposed to EDU. You don't probably deal with that very often. But we are worried because typically, the organizations in which these confidential folks with privilege the whole organization has privilege, but this would be a situation where we'd have privilege with an institution above it that wouldn't necessarily stand behind that privilege. So here's an example is, when we are subpoenaed, our victim service providers are subpoenaed, we move to quash those subpoenas. And in fact, people have in the past been held in contempt of court for refusing to provide that confidential information. But if you're an institution and you have a survivor who's working with you, but you also have a responsibility to the accused person as part of your institutional response, that level of confidentiality is only as good as the institution decides to uphold it. And so that is among other concerns that we have. We also are concerned about these being more and more insular. We know that all institutions, this is not about college and universities, tend to protect themselves, even when they don't realize they're doing it. And so the more that some of these victim survivors can receive services, even on campus through our providers, the less insular that response is. And then I would just say there is one other section. We did come to a place where we opposed the enforcement and penalty section. I think our experience working on multidisciplinary projects in Maine is that we often are able to come to a place where we're working together in good intentions. And I think the institutions want to do the best they can by survivors. They've got really good intentions. I think it's more of a question of not having the right path maybe to go down. And I think this is going to provide some of that. And so while we would heartily support penalties, should we come to a place where we feel like the institutions are not on board, we don't feel like that's where we are right now. We actually feel like we're in a really interesting phase because of this bill. Thank you, Senator Jackson, of increased collaboration. And so we just don't feel like the penalty section needs to be implemented right now. So I'm sorry that I think that was longer winded than I meant it to be, but it's complex. It's also complex. We've been working, as I said, for 2 years trying to dig through all of this and trying to think through every corner of it.
Thank you very much. You did a great job. I almost think I understood almost all of it.
Thank you very much. Any additional questions, folks, at this time? Seeing none.
Thank you for your time.
Axel, thank you. You have a good day. Next up is Andrea Mancuso, and Andrea will be followed by Nora Gallo.
Good morning, Senator Rafferty, distinguished members of the committee. My name is Andrea Mancuso. I'm the Public Policy Director for the Maine Coalition to End Domestic Violence, here today on behalf of our network in support of a majority of 1727, though, as my colleague Elizabeth noted, in opposition to a few sections of the bill, and with the hope that you'll support our recommended amendments. MCDV and our programs would first like to really acknowledge and appreciate the work of the many students and student survivors in bringing this legislation forward for your consideration. You'll hear from many of them this morning. The passion they've brought to creating more trauma-informed responses on campuses throughout Maine has really been quite remarkable to witness, and in sharing their stories and bringing forward their ideas, they've launched a conversation that will benefit survivors on campus for years to come. On the whole, this bill represents an opportunity for some really transformational changes in the way that we support our institutions of higher learning in responding to interpersonal violence on campus. However, as with any piece of national legislation, modifications are always necessary to align language and approach with responses that already exist here in Maine. And as my colleague Elizabeth noted, we encourage you to approach creating this new framework very carefully. We have appreciated the opportunity to work with students from the Every Voice Coalition, as well as with Senator Jackson and his team over the last 2 years. And the amendment put forward today by Senator Jackson is really a great starting place, and it contains many proposals that are groundbreaking and will really impact campus climate. As Senator Jackson noted, we're not 100% of the way there from our perspective. And to that end, we have been working with the Maine Coalition Against Sexual Assault and Pine Tree Legal Assistance and representatives from Maine's higher education institutions to try and reach consensus on additional proposed amendments to help ensure that the bill that ultimately comes out represents policy that can be enacted and implemented effectively. Together, our organizations are the ones that will be responsible for implementing whatever legislation is ultimately enacted. And we come to you with decades of experience working with students and staff on these issues, and we hope you'll rely on us as a resource as this conversation continues. To that end, we really do encourage the committee to consider the amendments we've suggested. Without these amendments, we see potential for some serious unintended consequences. I've discussed each section more in our written testimony, which also includes the more visually friendly chart section by section. It's attached to our testimony submission. I'm happy to take any questions that you might have. I think my colleague Elizabeth from Mikasa did a wonderful overview of both where we see the pieces of the bill really leaning in and creating some groundbreaking changes to the way and the access that students have to services on campus, and also some of the tricky parts that we think still need work. And I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you very much. Any questions, folks, at this time for Ms. Mancuso? Seeing none, we want to thank you for being with us this morning and taking the time to do so. You have a good day.
Thank you.
Next up is Nora Gallo. And Nora will be followed by India McNeil and Jenna Butler.
Hello, good morning. Good morning, Senator Brennan, Senator Rafferty, and members of the Education Committee and Cultural Affairs Committee. My name is Nora Gallo. I am a 2020 college alum and serve as co-executive director of the Every Voice Coalition, a student and survivor-led organization. For 2 years, we have been working with students across Maine to introduce the version of LD 1727 we are seeking to pass today. Over these past 2 years, we have supported students in Maine in drafting, introducing, and advocating for LD 1727. Some of them are here today, and some of them are unable to join due to work or class conflicts. We have sought input from and discussed this issue and the bill language at length with stakeholders like Mikasa, McKedvey, Maine Independent Colleges Association, Maine Community Colleges Systems, University of Maine System, and Maine Maritime Academy. With the needs of student survivors always at the center, we addressed our stakeholders' concerns, and LD 1727 has been shaped to address the urgent crisis that Maine students and survivors face today. This bill establishes necessary resources and supports for survivors, components we know are implementable. In drafting this bill, we continuously consulted lawyers with expertise in Title IX and other federal laws that seek to address campus sexual violence. In doing so, I'd like to assure you that we know that there are no components of LD 1727 that would conflict with federal guidelines nor place an undue burden on survivors, specifically the adoption of policy section or the confidential resource advisors with statutory privilege. And we have shared this with our stakeholders on multiple occasions. And I'd also like to share that in the states where bills with similar language has passed, Maine, Connecticut, Illinois, Nevada, and New Hampshire, implementation has proved to not only be possible, but effective in the intention of supporting students and survivors. In fact, just yesterday, we met with and spoke with a confidential resource advisor at a college in Massachusetts about the work that she is doing and what she is providing for students to give them accommodations, support them in the process of understanding where to go to file a report, et cetera. And she is doing an incredible job implementing the law in Massachusetts on her campus. Today, some of my colleagues and peers will share with you the devastating and traumatic impact of sexual violence and what follows in the post-incident process of seeking resources that are few and far between. The resources provided in LD 1727 must be available for survivors whether or not they are reporting. And that necessity is exactly what we have heard from students across the state. And I'd like to share one quote with you, a statement from a student, and there are more in my written testimony that I implore you to read. Advising is crucial given how few students are actually aware of their options when confronting the reality of post-trauma. Information like this, resources, services available directly to survivors, as well as information on sexual violence at each school must be available. So to wrap up, on behalf of students in Maine, I ask for the favorable passage of this bill through committee as introduced today. The components we are bringing forward to you have been thoughtfully and intentionally designed to address the pervasive issue and support 100% of survivors on Maine colleges. And this bill is exactly what student survivors are seeking and are asking for you to pass. This bill would mean fewer students would be forced to navigate the silencing, blaming, traumatizing experience of campus sexual violence that overshadows and all too often derails their time in college. May you act with urgency to codify their rights. And in a both professional and as a survivor myself, a personal capacity, I thank you for the opportunity to provide my testimony and support. And I'm very grateful for the stakeholders that we worked with in this process and Senate President's office for supporting us wholeheartedly along the way. And I'm happy to answer any questions, but really look forward to you being able to hear from students today.
Thank you very much, Ms. Gallo. Any questions, folks, at this time? Seeing none, thank you for being with us this morning. We appreciate your testimony, and you have a good day. Next up is India McNeil, and India will be followed by Jenna Butler and Kelly McCannell.
Good morning, Senator Rafferty, Representative Brennan, and members of the Education and Cultural Affairs Committee. My name is India McNeil, and I'm a current junior at Bates College and the current co-state director, along with Lottie Parsons, for the Every Voice Coalition in Maine. I'm here to testify in support of LD 1727, an act concerning sexual misconduct on college campuses. As you all know, and we're here today, Every Voice is a student-led organization fighting to combat sexual violence on college campuses through legislative advocacy. Ever since the founding of the Maine chapter for the Every Voice Coalition 2 years ago, we have been working hard to research, draft, and advocate for LD 1727. Across the board, college and university campuses made significant changes to make education possible during the COVID-19 pandemic. Since anticipating returning to normal campus life, or as normal as it can get, there needs to be significant changes to address another ongoing soon-to-be pandemic, campus sexual violence. LD 1727 has 5 main components that have been proven to reduce rates of sexual misconduct on college campuses. And today I will be talking about our 2 prevention components: biannual campus climate surveys and annual evidence-based prevention and response training. We know campus sexual violence is an issue, but there is such a lack of specific data. We need biannual campus climate surveys to increase transparency about sexual violence statistics and improve campus and public safety. The campus climate surveys will be used as a vehicle to promote an environment for students and survivors to have our voices heard. Furthermore, as college students, we all attend one sexual misconduct training during our entire 4 years, typically during our freshman year or transfer year, which is at the beginning of our college career at our institutions. Most students do not come to college with prior knowledge of the complicated web of Title IX, including myself. However, working with the Every Voice Coalition, I have been fortunate enough to attend workshops and trainings to learn more about the current best practices when it comes to prevention training. Also, most students do not know where to go if they are affected by sexual violence. And we also need these trainings to teach all members of a college community where their options are and learning how to intervene as a bystander properly. Now, I know that with any bill, cost will be a factor, but we also must talk about the cost for survivors. A recent study published in the Journal of American Health shows that 91% of survivors of campus sexual violence experience health problems related to the assault that they attribute to difficulties they face in their education and career goals. In addition to health problems, survivors often face extreme medical bills in order to receive mental health treatment. Another study found that 27% of survivors who reported their experiences to schools take a leave of absence, 20% transfer schools, and 10% drop out entirely. This disruption of education for so many survivors has incredible lifelong financial impacts, including student loan debt and earning trajectory. Campus sexual violence is an issue that is continually becoming worse, and we have to do something about it. As legislators, you all have the power to make a change. I have so valued the opportunity to speak with so many legislators about this bill, many of whom have expressed to me how they have children who are in college or soon to be in college. As a college student, I never thought I would have the opportunity to speak to so many of you all and have my voice heard. Thank you so much for taking the time and the past 2 years to listen to the voices of students, recent alums, and survivors. I strongly urge the committee to vote LD 1727 favorable out of committee. Thank you.
Thank you, India. Any questions, folks, of Ms. McNeil at this time? Seeing none, thank you for being with us this morning, and we appreciate your testimony.
Thank you.
Have a good day. Next up will be Jenna Butler, and Jenna will be followed by Kelly McCannell.
Senator Rafferty and esteemed members of the Education and Cultural Affairs Committee. My name is Jenna Butler, and I'm a senior at the University of Southern Maine. I serve as the legislative lead for Every Voice Maine, and I support LD 1727. I got involved with Every Voice a couple years ago, and the work I have done with them has shaped me into the person before you today. As a survivor myself, I felt as though nobody was looking out for me, but then I found a community of people who wanted to change this, not only for me, but for other survivors as well. We all theoretically know the burdens that survivors carry, but what can we do about them? Why should survivors have to worry about accessing resources? We as students deserve access to information about how safe our campus climate truly is. We deserve education to prevent these things from happening in the first place. We deserve the choice to report free of retaliation. We also deserve the right to know our options without having to report. LD 1727 ensures that all students and survivors have access to these needs across Maine. I wish I had these types of resources years ago when I needed them. I am here today to stress to you the importance of this bill for future students. By voting favorable for this bill, you're telling students and survivors that they are valid and deserve healing and safety. You're taking a stand against sexual violence and providing care and compassion for future generations of students on Maine campuses. We want this, and we hope you do too. I strongly urge the committee to vote favorable on this bill. Thank you.
Thank you. And are there any questions of Ms. Butler at this time, folks? Jenna, thank you for your testimony. We appreciate you taking the time to be with us this morning. Good luck with your work moving forward. Next up is going to be Kelly McCannell, and Kelly will be followed by Kim Simmons.
Good morning, Representative Brennan, Senator Rafferty, and members of the Education and Cultural Affairs Committee. My name is Kelly McCannell, and I am the Executive Director of Grandmothers for Reproductive Rights, or GER, and I'm here to voice our organization's support for LD 1727. GER works through education and advocacy to secure access to sexual and reproductive health, rights, and justice for present and future generations. As elders, GERs are impressed and moved by the survivor-led and centered work of the Every Voice Coalition to bring a set of standards and protocols to Maine's colleges and universities around responses to sexual violence. Listening to Maine's young people, it is obvious that there is an urgent need to invest more deeply in survivor-driven and accessible services and support for our state students. Unfortunately, sexual harassment and violence remain threads connecting us to younger generations, and this is why our solidarity is so critical. Young people know what they need in order to heal and thrive when sexual violence occurs. GERs have organized towards gender equity for many decades, and we will not stop until safety, autonomy, and community support replace sexual violation, reproductive coercion, and stigma as formative experiences for young people. The spirit of LD 1727 is a commitment to meeting survivors' needs and fostering sexually positive and safer learning communities, rather than zeroing in on punitive measures for perpetrators. The amnesty policy removes a significant barrier to survivors getting services. Biennial climate surveys keep schools' responses in alignment with student needs. Annual prevention training sustains a climate of respect for boundaries and consent, rather than checking off a box once during the first academic year. Formalized relationships with sexual assault crisis centers across our state can significantly improve coordination of response for survivors, thereby mitigating harm and disruption to their social and academic lives. It is critical that students have confidential advisors they can seek out for support. It's unclear if an advisor attached to a particular institution can ever be fully impartial in their support. So we do ask lawmakers to seriously consider how to best ensure confidentiality and loyalty to meeting survivors' needs. We applaud Maine's young people for pushing our state's institutions of higher learning to better assess, prevent, and address climates of sexual violence and coercion among student populations. GER urges the committee to vote in support of this bill, and we thank you for your consideration.
Thank you very much, Ms. McCannell. Any questions, folks, at this time? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony. We appreciate you taking the time to be with us this morning. You have a good afternoon. Next up is Kimberly Simmons, and Kimberly will be followed by Lily James.
Senator Rafferty and members of the Education Committee, my name is Dr. Kimberly Simmons from Portland, Maine, and I am testifying today in support of LD 1727. This topic is important to me at the most personal level. I lost a 19-year-old niece to suicide. My youngest daughter begins college in the fall, and I fear for her. My students share disclosures with me every semester, and my heart breaks for them. I also am a sociologist wanting to share findings from the research, but 3 minutes goes by quickly, so I will submit longer testimony with footnotes. For now, I will share my top reasons for supporting LD 1727. First, we ask youth to engage in solution building, and we should listen to them when they put the work in, as the members of the Every Voice Coalition have done. This problem has persisted for decades, with almost no decline in reported rates of campus sexual violence over the last 15 years. Despite current efforts, there are very few formal reports described in the latest Clery Act reports. What we currently offer simply isn't working. We need to listen to frontline communities now. Second, the consequences of sexual violence can be severe and long-lasting. This legislative body has expressed significant concerns about adolescent mental health problems and suicidality, and addressing sexual violence is a core prevention strategy. Sexual violence drives students out of school without degrees at a time when we are committed to workforce development. We have a moral obligation and a community interest in stemming violence on campus. As a faculty member, I often feel hopeless when students share disclosures with me. Although I am trained in this material in an academic context, I am not trained to provide direct support. And there are times when holding their trauma leaves me sleepless. It affects my own work. I need my workplace to offer more. The problem of institutional betrayal is well documented and pernicious. To the extent that formal reporting has harmed rather than helped many student survivors, we've reduced educational equity and undermined trust in higher education. We have a responsibility to develop processes for adjudicating sexual violence cases in a fair and trauma-informed way. But in the meantime, students deserve basic, high-quality, confidential supports to facilitate healing and help make it possible for them to stay in school. An estimated 90% of cases go unreported right now, leaving other students to serve as informal and untrained support networks, which also affects their well-being and education. Campuses must do more to connect survivors with high-quality care. I hope that members of this committee and the full legislature see the importance of standing with students and with survivors to pledge more safety and more care when safety is not available. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions, folks, of Ms. Simmons at this time? Ms. Simmons, thank you for being with us today. We appreciate your testimony, and I'm sorry for the loss of your niece. I'm sure that's very difficult to deal with. So, thanks for your time today, and good afternoon. Next up is, I believe is Lily James, and Lily will be followed by Locke Parsons and Rhea Alim.
Good morning, Representative Brennan, Senator Rafferty, and members of the Education Committee. My name is Lily James. I'm a 2021 college graduate and current Maine resident, and serve as co-executive director of the Every Voice Coalition. And I am here today in support of LD 1727. As you've already heard, Every Voice is a student, young alum, and survivor-led organization that has fought tirelessly on behalf of survivor and student rights in Maine to bring LD 1727 before you today. These students have researched, met with stakeholders, drafted, redrafted, met with more stakeholders, and shared their work with legislators, including many of you in this room today, all with the goal of passing their student-written bill, LD 1727, into law in Maine, to make Maine the 6th state in the nation to have passed an Every Voice bill to address the epidemic of campus sexual violence we face on our campuses every day. I first do also want to share, for some context, that it is quite jarring and deeply disappointing to see representatives from Maine schools testifying against our bill today. We have worked hard and specifically to address their concerns and questions, and are very surprised to see their testimony in opposition. It is also indeed jarring to see students here today from these institutions that are testifying against this bill. Clearly, students know what they need and know how they would be best served, and they've written their needs into this bill. I want to use most of my time today to put some context into what students are experiencing every day on campuses. Estimates show, as you've heard, that 1 in 10 students will experience sexual violence during their time in college, which means some 7,000 currently enrolled Maine students have experienced or will experience sexual violence. What happens in the aftermath of these traumatic incidents? Where do these students go? Who do they talk to? What resources do they have to help them heal physically, emotionally, and mentally? Right now, student survivors have one option: report to Title IX. However, only some 5% of students will decide to do that. So for the remaining 95% of students, their list of options have run out. There are no places left to go. They are left with no support system, no one to guide them through any sort of healing process in the places they call home. And this is often compounded with the reality that first semester students are most at risk of sexual violence, which means that students are likely navigating this traumatic aftermath while also navigating college and trying to figure out their new academic and social environments. Many of these students will take leaves of absences or drop out of college altogether, and many of these students will experience PTSD, depression, anxiety, and/or abuse alcohol or drugs, often as a means of self-medication. Further, estimates show that the lifetime cost of rape, also often including student loan debt as a result of adverse impacts on a survivor's educational trajectory, to be over $122,000 per survivor. I know that the picture I've just painted is a stark one, and one that may feel overwhelming or insurmountable. But the good news is that LD 1727 aims to address the issues and gaps at the core of this issue on campuses. Each word in each section is crucial and implementable. So while this is a devastating and serious issue, it is not insurmountable. And this has been done in other states before: Massachusetts, New Hampshire, Nevada, Illinois, and Connecticut, and similar bills are being worked on all across the country as we speak. Maine has the opportunity to be the 6th state to take action to prioritize their students' safety and stand up and make this critical change. It is something we can and will solve together, but it's something that we cannot keep waiting to address, because every year that we wait, we are putting thousands of students at risk when we could have done more. Thank you so much for listening to the voices of students who have already spoken today, and many of whom will be speaking later today. I also want to thank the broad support from those with us today and those whom we have had the chance to meet with over the last 2 years. We are so grateful for you all and for your work with us as we've worked on this bill. I urge the committee to vote LD 1727 favorably out of committee, and I'm so grateful for your time and support of this bill today. And happy to answer any questions today or during the work session in the next couple of days. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. James. Any questions, folks, at this time? Seeing none, thank you again for being here. We appreciate your testimony and your good luck with the continued work. Have a good day. Next up is Lot Parsons. Good morning.
Good morning, Senator Rafferty and members of the Education and Cultural Affairs Committee. My name is Lottie Parsons. I'm a current senior at Bowdoin College and a co-state director of Every Voice Maine, alongside India McNeil. I'm here today to express my ardent support for LD 1727. Today, I will speak directly to 2 components of the bill: confidential resource advisors and memoranda of understanding with sexual assault support centers and domestic violence resource centers. Before diving into these components, I would like to emphasize the intention of this bill. LD 1727 aims to prevent campus sexual violence, as well as recognizes the reality of the occurrence of sexual violence and the need to support survivors within this reality. Let me emphasize this again. Rather than focusing on or even including punitive measures, this bill focuses wholly on preventing sexual violence and supporting survivors. LD 1727 will ensure that every institution of higher education in Maine has a memorandum of understanding with a local sexual assault support center and domestic violence resource center. Through these partnerships, all student survivors will have access to medical and legal resources at no out-of-pocket cost. These relationships will create a broader community of support around each campus, relying on the expertise of established resource centers. Another section of the bill, confidential resource advisors, establishes on every campus a person with legal privilege who is able to guide students through the support-seeking process, directing them to campus accommodations and support services without implicating a Title IX, investigation. On the basis of a series of conversations with students from college and university campuses across the state, I firmly believe that the section of LD 1727 providing for confidential resource advisors is a critical component of addressing the campus sexual violence epidemic. Fundamentally, this position ensures that all students of higher education in Maine will have access to a space free of judgment and legal implications, in which they may discuss student rights and resources, available on-campus accommodations, and different reporting options. We have heard repeatedly from students that the opacity of both Title IX processes and campus reporting structures has been a barrier to accessing support resources necessary to student success and well-being. In the absence of a campus employee in this position, students are motivated by fear and ambiguity to navigate much of these processes on their own. Moreover, this absence places an additional burden on the shoulders of student survivors who've already navigated these processes, as they often become informal, which is to say unpaid and untrained, advisors to their peers. These concerns would be significantly alleviated by the availability of a campus employee with legal privilege within the campus context and with the capacity to aid and inform student survivors. While LD 1727 as a whole establishes extensive support for student survivors, the impact of other support measures, memorandums of understanding, amnesty policies included in this bill is amplified by the CRA position, as a confidential resource advisor would be able to point student survivors in the direction of these resources. These two aspects of the bill interact powerfully with each other. Each component of LD 1727 strengthens each other component. Due to a variety of personal reasons and individual circumstances, a student may feel more comfortable seeking support off campus than on campus, or vice versa. In this way, the combination of confidential resource advisors and memoranda of understanding returns autonomy and agency to student survivors. Though we do not have accurate data currently on the occurrence of sexual violence, we know that the vast majority of student survivors do not choose to report or seek formal support. These components will ensure that fewer students slip through the cracks. Thank you all so much for your time today. Members of the Education and Cultural Affairs Committee, for everyone who is, knows, or loves a Maine college student, please vote this bill favorably out of committee as soon as possible.
Thank you, Ms. Parsons. We do have some a question. Representative McCray, please. You're muted, sir.
There, sorry about that. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for being here, Ms. Parsons. I do have a quick little question having to do with the concerns of the organization such as Mikasa, having to do with a couple of things that they thought might turn out to be an unintended consequence. So has your organization, Every Voice, seen those concerns, and have they been discussed, and do you have anything you wish to say about those? Thank you.
Yes, we have been in ongoing conversation with both Mikasa and McKedvey, and we are so grateful for their contributions to the bill, and we have chosen to make some changes based on conversations that we've had. But I firmly believe that confidential resource advisors are incredibly necessary to this bill. I believe that it will provide more clarity, not less, for survivors, because this person can become a point person that can direct students to any other resources that might be a good fit for them. And I also believe that the legal privilege of this position is incredibly important to the integrity of the position, because we need a space where students can speak with complete trust and know that there will not be legal implications for those conversations.
Thank you very much for your testimony and your answer.
Thank you.
Any additional questions, folks? Seeing none, Ms. Parsons, again, thank you for being with us this morning. We appreciate your testimony and your insight. You have a good afternoon. Next up is Raya Alim, and then Ramus Anderson, and last would be Zoe Nguyen, all speaking in favor. Good morning.
Good morning, Senator Rafferty and members of the Education and Cultural Affairs Committee. My name is Raya Alim, and I'm a current student at UMass Amherst. So I'm not a resident of the state of Maine, but I am testifying today in favor of LD 1727. I want to start off by saying that students and survivors are at the forefront of this entire discussion. I had the honor of serving on the task force on sexual misconduct surveys this past year in Massachusetts as a student representative. And this task force was created as a result of passing Chapter 337 of the Acts of 2020. My main goal as both a student and survivor was to make sure that my voice was heard and that I could help create something that would combat sexual violence, much like the students who came together to write LD 1727. In speaking with you today, I wanted to discuss two key aspects of the bill: the Interpersonal Violence Campus Climate Survey and the amnesty policy. In order to best combat and learn more about sexual violence rates on campuses, it is extremely important that we collect data through a biannual campus climate survey that accurately represents what is happening at both 2- and 4-year institutions. Data on the topic is currently very varied and sparse, and thus accurate information is very hard to come by. Additionally, it is key that an amnesty policy be implemented so that survivors do not face any victim blaming throughout the reporting process, and that this policy will also help survivors and bystanders both from being penalized due to either code violations or being in the presence of illegal drugs and alcohol. Finally, I would just like to say that Massachusetts, New Hampshire, Nevada, Illinois, and Connecticut all have passed a sister bill to LD 1727, and I urge you to consider the power you have to make change and to further enhance the lives of so many students by pushing forward this bill. I just want to thank you for your time, and members of the Education and Cultural Affairs Committee, please vote this bill favorably out of committee as soon as possible. Thank you.
Thank you, and thanks for your testimony. Folks, do we have any questions at this time? Yes, Representative Dodge.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning. Thank you for being here. My question is around the construction of the survey questions did you develop those, or were those developed by professional survey specialists, please?
Yeah, of course. So both of these, so the questions that we developed for the sexual misconduct survey that we're trying to pass for every school in Massachusetts, they're a combination of past survey questions from AAU and ARC3, but we also changed some of the language as a task force, really specifically trying to make the questions as gender inclusive as possible, to make them more trauma informed so they're not too traumatizing if a survivor is answering those questions. So it's a mix of really past survey questions, but changed so that it better suits the questions that we're trying to ask and the data we're trying to collect.
A follow-up, if I may, Mr. Chair.
Please, yes.
Are you the person to whom I should direct a question about the survey data reporting, please? Do you have information on that, or to whom should I direct that question?
I personally do not have information on that, but I do believe that the information on this specific bill is public on the Massachusetts legislation website.
Thank you.
Any additional questions, folks? Seeing none, thank you very much for your time shared. Are you actually sitting in Massachusetts now? No, well, that's okay. No, thank you for your time. Thank you for your testimony. You have a good day.
Thank you.
Thank you. And next speaker will be Ramus Anderson and then Zoe Nguyen.
Senator Rafferty, I did not see Remus Anderson in the attendees list. If I am mistaken, would you please raise your hand so I can move you over at this time? Seeing no hands raised, Senator, we can move on to Zoe Nguyen. Thank you.
Thank you.
Representative Brennan, Senator Rafferty, and members of the Education and Cultural Affairs Committee. My name is Zoe Nguyen, and I'm a student at Bates College. I live in Lewiston and am represented by Representative Cloutier and Senator Libby. Last year, I served as Maine State Director with the Every Voice Coalition. Through my advocacy with Every Voice, I talked to countless students about their experiences with sexual violence on college campuses. I can tell you firsthand, as an advocate and a college student, that sexual violence and affects the lives of almost every student, either through a personal experience or through someone close to them being a survivor. The resources on campus are not adequate enough, and passing LD 1727 will lead to safer college campuses in which students can focus on their academics and are not worried about where they will turn if they become a survivor. It is deeply upsetting to have heard so many students tell me that the Title IX process on their campus is too confusing, puts the blame on them, makes them feel ashamed, or takes too long as the reasons why they choose to stay silent. It is essential that we have confidential resource advisors CRAs included in LD 1727 and effectively passed into Maine state law in order for students to feel like they have a voice in how they choose to proceed with the reporting process. Most students I have talked to are unaware of what support services are available to them within their Title IX office. I have watched as peers have dropped out of school or taken leaves of absence because they do not feel sufficiently supported by their Title IX offices and are made to feel as if they are at fault. If there are CRAs on every campus across Maine, students will be supported physically, emotionally, and mentally. It is absolutely essential to have them at every school. CRAs will allow for students to thrive academically and to not have to carry the emotional burden of being a survivor with no support. You have the power to change the lives of thousands of college students across the state of Maine. Members of the Education and Cultural Affairs Committee, please vote this bill favorably out of committee as soon as possible. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Nguyen. Any questions, folks, at this time? Yes, Representative Dodge.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, Ms. Nguyen. Thank you for being with us. May I ask, are you currently on a university campus? I didn't hear your.
Yes, I'm currently on Bates College campus.
Yes, thank you very much. So my question is, do you at Bates College have posters and little notices in your dorms and in your buildings where you have your classes, notices that say, if you are a victim of sexual assault, this is the number to call? I've been on a number of campuses and have seen that sort of communication to help students know where to turn. Is that process implemented at Bates College and other colleges that you have seen, please? Thank you.
Yeah, so I kind of would like to respond to that question on a few different points. The first is we do have some posters that are around campus. They are not very clearly publicized, and I know sometimes students feel stigmatized taking pictures or trying to memorize what they say or even taking them with them. I know personally I had a friend who recently, as of last month, decided to take a leave of absence because the Title IX office was unfortunately not able to give her the proper support. So even though there are signs and numbers of people to contact at Bates, it unfortunately is not sufficient. And I know that Bates is a school that does put an emphasis on making sure that students do feel like there are resources, but there are plenty of schools across Maine, specifically schools that are not traditional four-year institutions of higher education learning that don't have the resources or time to create those posters or signs up for students and provide those resources. And that can be really tough for non-traditional students who maybe won't know where to turn. And I also would like to bring up what India McNeil, the current co-state director for Every Voice, testified to earlier, that we are typically given information the first week or in orientation of college, right? And so by the time you're a senior, maybe where you need to turn next has slipped your mind, you don't remember. So that can oftentimes present challenges. But thank you for your question.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions, folks, at this time of Ms. Nguyen? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony. We appreciate you being with us this morning, and have a good afternoon. Ms. Nguyen was the last person speaking for the LD. The next grouping of folks will be speaking against. And for the order for that, I have Amy Parker, Becky Smith, Angela Schamberger, and then Joe Cohen. Ms. Parker.
Good morning, Senator Rafferty and members of the committee. Thank you for this opportunity to share our thoughts on LD 1727. My name is Amy Parker, and I'm the Director of Equal Opportunity and Title IX Coordinator for the University of Maine system. And I want to say that I value the voices of survivors of sexual and domestic violence And I've devoted my career to supporting and empowering both students and employees to feel and be safe on our college campuses and in our communities. And I will say that given this, it's really difficult to stand before you today personally on behalf of UMS in opposition to this bill as it's currently proposed by the sponsor's amendment. I have a young niece who attends one of our campuses. Her safety and the safety of all of our students is of the utmost importance to me. The positive intent of the bill is unquestionable. However, several of its key provisions would create such significant conflict and confusion with federal law that we worry students would ultimately be made less safe and feel less supported by this. You've also heard testimony from the Maine Coalition Against Sexual Assault and the Maine Coalition to End Domestic Violence that this bill includes unintended consequences. The bill before you is extensive, so I'm going to focus my testimony on our overarching concerns and a few key sections that UMS can generally support, excuse me, because they are either consistent with our current policies and practices, or they could be implemented in a manner that's compatible with superseding federal law, including Title IX and the Violence Against Women and Clery Acts. Before I do so, however, I do want to overview the extensive services that all UMS universities already provide to prevent sexual and domestic violence within our campus communities and to connect those who do experience incidents of violence to survivor-centered supports. UMS has a single system-wide policy, which I've attached to my testimony, that is related to sex discrimination, sexual harassment, and assault, relationship violence, and stalking and retaliation. The policy is required by and consistent with federal law Title IX, and it renders sections of LD 1727 unnecessary, as its enactment would establish a parallel process that could make students and survivors less clear about their rights and recourse, and unfortunately, possibly less likely to exercise them. UMS policy makes clear our commitment to providing a safe environment that promotes the dignity and worth of all individuals, our intolerance for sexual and domestic violence, and that we will respond to all reports of violations in a prompt, fair, impartial, and equal manner, regardless of whether a formal complaint is ever filed. It also assures survivors that their prior sexual conduct will not be questioned, nor will students who disclose incidents be disciplined for related illegal alcohol or drug use. We call amnesty, or as referenced in this bill, immunity. Our campuses connect survivors with academic and student life accommodations, such as additional time to complete assignments, excused absences from class, changes in their living arrangements, high quality on and off campus health and counseling services, and safety escorts and planning, among other accommodations. Let me be clear, none of these supportive measures and accommodations are dependent upon a survivor agreeing to submit a formal report, go through a Title IX complaint process, or notify law enforcement. When I first meet with individuals and overview their options and our resources, I'm really clear and I let them know. I do not want to take away any more power from you. I am here for you in the way that you need me to be. Per our system policy, most university employees are mandatory reporters, and compulsory annual employee training outlines the requirements of that important responsibility. Mandatory reporting has an important role. It ensures that universities supports impacted individuals, helps us identify patterns that can inform remedial action, and creates a climate on our campuses that sexual assault and discrimination is unacceptable. As an example, university syllabi convey to students the mandatory reporting obligation of their professors and list both off-campus, confidential resources, and on-campus resources for those who have experienced or witnessed sexual and domestic violence or gender discrimination. If a student submits a class writing assignment in which they reference an incident of sexual violence, their professor will let the student know that they have reporting duties under the law, and they make that required report to the campus Title IX coordinator, who will in turn reach out to the student. We never compel students to engage with our Title IX office. We offer support and resources, and we provide information via those outreach efforts. While all university employees are committed to upholding student privacy, only our professional and pastoral counselors and licensed health professionals can commit to complete confidentiality. That's because per Title IX and state law, there are rare and well-defined circumstances in which the Title IX coordinator and other employees cannot maintain a complainant's confidentiality in the course of a formal investigation. This is when ensuring the safety of the broader campus community or if we are subpoenaed. Given this, no school that receives federal funding can designate the confidential resource advisors proposed by this bill without being in violation of federal law. However, because we believe the survivors and allies that you've heard from today who say students seek greater assurances of confidentiality and may feel more comfortable accessing off-campus services, we welcome MOUs with local sexual assault support and domestic violence resource centers as proposed by the bill. In fact, several of our universities have these agreements already, and we appreciate the completely confidential and competent care these community-based providers can uniquely provide our students, including access to civil legal services. These organizations have been tremendous partners to us in our roles. As you've seen from our work to reach agreement on this bill, Maine's colleges and universities and the state's leading sexual and domestic violence prevention and response resource providers can and do work well together. Having MOUs is consistent with our shared goal to prevent and end violence and support survivors. We appreciate that Every Voice Coalition has come to Maine to elevate the experience of survivors here. UMS wants to hear more from our Maine students about their perceptions of safety on our campuses and how our policies and practices could serve them better. For this reason, we are supportive of regular climate surveys that focus on interpersonal violence, though it is important that our institutional researchers have flexibility to develop these surveys to ensure that their findings are valid, that they're reliable, and that they're actionable. And finally, the more financial resources we all have to support this important work, the more comprehensive the resources that we can provide our students and survivors. Our system is already grateful for the federal funding some of our universities have been competitively awarded through the Department of Justice's Office on Violence Against Women. While UMS strongly objects to the unproductive penalties proposed by this bill, our public institutions welcome targeted appropriations by this legislature, including for the Maine Coalition Against Sexual Assault and to End Domestic Violence and Pine Tree Legal to better address the concerns raised today and to carry out any new requirements born from the final bill. I thank you for your opportunity to testify, for your attention to sexual and domestic violence, and for your ongoing support of our public universities. UMS is hopeful the committee is amenable to the unified recommendations of the Coalition of Maine-based higher education and service provider organizations here today. And I, along with the system's interim general counsel, Pat Peard, and our director of government relations, Samantha Warren, look forward to participating in the work session as we move forward. I welcome your questions.
Thank you, Ms. Parker. Folks, do we have any questions of Ms. Parker at this time? Yes, Representative Dodge.
Thank you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your testimony this morning. My question for you is, if I am a student applying to a school in the University of Maine system or one of our community colleges, can you describe to me how and where I would find information about the number of sexual assaults that have occurred on those campuses, please?
Yeah, so under the Clery Act, we are all required to publish these findings on an annual basis, and they should be published right on our main pages. So you would find a link. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Murphy, any other questions of Ms. Murphy? Before you leave, just one quick one for me is, and so statistically, are you seeing an increase in cases being reported over the last, let's say, 5 years?
Yes, and I don't consider that a bad thing, because underreporting is a problem that if we don't have visibility to the issues, we cannot address them. So yes, there is increased reports, but it is not directly correlated to the number of assaults per se.
Thank you. And just a quick follow-up, before I give the floor to Senator Woodson. So in that you're seeing an increase in reports, which is again a good thing. Is there a reflection in terms of the financial commitment to provide same services for those folks in your budget?
So we do have individuals on each campus that are dedicated to providing support and resources. And we do have individuals like myself that support all 7 campuses in the law school. And then we also engage in prevention training and things like that. I will say this is an effort that is intensive and it does require resources, and I think it can always be better supported.
Thank you very much. Senator Woodson has a question, please, sir.
Thank you. You've listed a number of reasons why this bill conflicts with present policy and federal law. Are there any parts of the bill that you feel that could be adopted and improved the system that you have in supporting?
Yes, so we do appreciate the idea of having regular campus climate surveys. I think that is important to inform the work that we do. That is one of the things that we are very committed to and support. And again, that's just one of those things that we want to make sure that the questions are befitting the work that we're doing and are appropriate and can inform the work. I think there are parts that we want to move forward with, but we're not sure that they require this bill. So as an example, the MOUs with our local service providers are a great idea, and I think we would happily engage in that work with our providers.
Okay, and for the public hearings, I'd be interested in more information on how this bill would conflict with federal laws and one thing or the other, just so I have a better understanding of what we're up against here. I don't know if you can provide that for the workshop.
In the work session?
Yes.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Any additional questions of Ms. Parker at this time, folks? Seeing none, again, thank you very much for your testimony. We appreciate your being with us this morning and for your continued work with the university. Have a good afternoon. Folks, our next person up for testimony is Becky Smith. Becky will be followed by Angela Barger and Joe Kahn.
Great. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, thank you.
Oh, great. I'm not in my usual location. I moved closer to Representative Stearns. I'm up at Eastern Maine Community College today. Senator Rafferty and members of the Joint Standing Committee on Education and Cultural Affairs. My name is Becky Smith, and I am providing testimony in opposition to LD 1727 on behalf of the Maine Community College system. It is not easy to sit here today before you and oppose a bill whose goal is to make our campuses safer and to make it easier for students and employees to obtain needed supports and services. In fact, we debated testifying neither for nor against, because despite the many problems with this bill that prevent us from supporting it, colleges should use their resources to prevent sexual violence, intimate partner violence, or stalking, and to assist those who have been subject to such traumatic events. We completely understand the Senate President's desire to help, especially after hearing emotional stories from advocates. However, this bill, even as amended by the Senate President, does not accomplish the stated goals set out by the sponsor or the Every Voices Coalition, which is the national organization you heard from earlier that he's been working with to develop this policy proposal. When we met with the Every Voices Coalition and the Senate President's staff, the coalition made it very clear that college students in Maine and across the country do not know about the resources available on their campuses. That college students across the country need supports and often don't know where to turn for help. We are committed to enhance our current trainings and information campaigns to ensure that every current student, faculty, and staff member knows where on campus to turn for help in times of need before that need arises. We will also ensure that they know about Maine's amazing system of legal aid, counseling, and crisis centers for victims of sexual assault, stalking, and domestic violence, a system the Maine legislature funds and that other states, quite frankly, don't have. This bill is incredibly complex, and rather than go through the bill line by line in my testimony, I want to touch on a few places of agreement and a few of the larger issues. And I do apologize in advance for the length of my testimony. My written testimony is longer, and I did cut some of this out, but I do think it's important to hear from us since we do have 17,000 students in Maine. We agree that a survey can be an effective tool in assessing the climate on our campuses, much as you've heard earlier and you heard so eloquently from Ms. Parker. If done correctly, and it has to be done correctly by qualified public health survey professionals, it is important to us that the survey tool be designed in a manner to result in relevant, reliable statistic information that will inform us on campus safety issues and needed improvements to our current policies, procedures, trainings, or informational campaigns. We also agree that codifying our current immunity policy would bring a level of certainty to individuals who report allegations of sexual violence, intimate partner violence, or stalking, and encourage such reports. Accordingly, we support that section of the bill. With regard to the MOA required in this bill, our college staff members, including our Title IX coordinators, already recommend the services of the Maine Coalition to End Domestic Violence and the Maine Coalition Against Sexual Assault and their partners to all students and staff who need specialized supports and resources. If the legislature would like to require us to enter into formal MOUs with these organizations, we will. There are many aspects of this bill that we do not support because they do not make our campuses meaningfully safer or simplify a complex area of law, and they conflict with federal laws in ways that are not easily resolved by the recent inclusion of an inoperability provision in the Senate President's amendment. And to Senator Woodsum's point, I will make sure that we have someone from our general counsel's office available for the work session if you'd like a detailed itemization of how that happens. And I also have a memo that we sent to the Senate President that I could share with you. We are also concerned that this bill creates the misimpression that our colleges do not already provide protections for students and employees who have experienced sexual violence, intimate partner violence, or stalking. In reality, the community colleges already provide a broad range of supports and services to their students and employees, many of which were provided long before the passage of federal regulations in this area. The community colleges comply with the myriad requirements of the Violence Against Women Act, as well as the comprehensive Title IX regulations adopted by the Federal Department of Education. The Title IX regulations were substantially revised in August 2020, and proposed revisions favorable to those who have experienced sexual and intimate partner violence are expected to be issued for public comment in the coming weeks. This bill adds layers on top of the existing federal requirements, which will make the process more confusing to reporters and respondents and more challenging to administer. Second, a primary concern is the mandatory addition to our staff of a confidential resource advisor, or CRA. In practice, and as a matter of law, as Ms. Parker stated, every college's Title IX coordinator is a confidential resource advisor. Students do not need to file a complaint or participate in a disciplinary process to obtain the services of the coordinator, who is subject to federal confidentiality law applicable to all students, as well as the confidentiality provisions of Title IX. If our students do not know this, we need to do a better job informing them of already available resources. Our students are best served by ensuring that they are aware of the supports they can obtain through Title IX coordinator and by seeking that coordinator's help, not by creating a new position that duplicates many of the same duties. Further, under Title IX, the colleges must provide equal resources to each party to a complaint of sexual assault, domestic or dating violence, or stalking. There is no resource a college can offer to a responding party that is equal to the privileged communications afforded to a reporting party by the confidential resource advisor. Third, the policy section of the bill will result in another set of campus policies and procedures governing the subject area. Because the new policies and procedures will have different definitions and a different scope than under federal law, they will be in addition to and not a substitute for federal counterparts, making this landscape even more difficult to navigate. Another area of concern is the definitions section. The definition of student and employee are overly broad and include every student who ever left without a degree and every employee who left for any reason. We appreciate the concerns raised by the Senate President and the Every Voice Coalition. We recognize that other states, ones that do not have Maine's regulatory structure and robust legal aid and supports for victims of sexual violence, intimate partner violence, and stalking, have enacted portions of this national template legislation. We have identified those parts of the bill that we can support because they will meaningfully enhance our current system of resources and protections, but the remaining sections do not make our campuses meaningfully safer or provide our students and employees with a simplified process for obtaining needed supports. We're happy to answer any questions and are willing, as I said earlier, to have experts available for a work session. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Folks, do we have any questions? Yes, Senator Woodson, please.
Thank you. And thank you, Ms. Smith, for being here. I admit my lack of fully understanding the ins and outs of this situation.
Mm-hmm.
A part of the campus resources, I would think a big part of the hurdle or obstacle for these individuals who have been affected by this would be legal counsel. How is that handled by the university system?
Well, I can speak briefly to, I believe Pine Tree Legal is speaking after. They're neither for nor against, I believe, so they'll be speaking later. I would like our attorneys to answer exactly how we would handle legal counsel if there was a Title IX complaint on campus. I don't want to misrepresent how we would handle that, but I do know that in Maine, the legislature has funded very robust, comprehensive, and coordinated system for victims of sexual assault, domestic violence, and stalking that we routinely will send our students to those resources. And I personally was not aware of these resources until this bill, which I actually thank the Senate President for bringing this forward. This is how I learn about the amazing community colleges I represent, and about our amazing state. The legislature funds this so that Maine has this great system where if a student goes to one of these providers, Mikasa, let's say, as an example, and it looks as though they will need legal representation, there's a smooth transition to Pine Tree Legal to help them with that. I will get back to you on how our campuses handle that process, but that is one of the things I've learned. And of course, well over 90% of the students that attend Maine's community colleges do not live on campus. We have a very small residential campus population across the state, and many of our students, as you've heard from us for as long as we've been around, are working, living at home, and are in off-campus situations.
Okay, thank you very much.
Folks, any additional questions? Yes, Representative Dodge.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Ms. Smith, for being with us today. My question is about the interaction, and perhaps this isn't just for you, but for the University of Maine system and Maine Maritime Academy as well. But for the work session, can we have some idea about the communication that exists between campus organizations and your Title IX folks as far as communicating the availability of services? Some details about procedure. How does that happen that you are currently using all avenues to make sure that students are aware of all that they can use to help in this situation? Thank you.
Absolutely. I'll get you that for the work session.
Any other questions, folks, at this time? Seeing none, Ms. Smith, thank you very much for being with us this morning. We appreciate your time and your testimony, as well as your continued efforts. Have a good day.
Thank you. I will.
So next up is Angela Schamberger, and Angela will be followed by Joe Kahn.
Thank you, Senator Rafferty, Representative Brennan, and the members of the Joint Standing Committee on Education and Cultural Affairs. My name is Angela Schamberger, and I'm the Title IX coordinator for the University of New England. And I'm also here today on behalf of my university and the Maine Association of Independent Colleges. I'm following some very eloquent testimony that Amy and Becky provided, but it's important to note that as Title IX coordinator, I'm responsible for the university's compliance under Title IX and to provide awareness and prevention programming for students and employees, to respond to concerns and complaints involving gender equity issues, harassment, and sexual and relationship violence. And as a result, I deal with the issues raised in this bill daily and understand the importance of the policy area for the students and employees I serve. But on behalf of MICA, we would like to thank the Every Voice Coalition and the students for bringing the campus sexual assault issue forward. I've spent my career working to help students in these situations. And however, we know we can always do better. And so it's so critical that we continue to have these conversations. I'm testifying today, ironically, in opposition to LD 1727, because the bill as it's currently written conflicts directly, as has been noted, with other duties under federal law, establishing parallel processes, creating unworkable broad definitions, creating duplicative positions on our campuses. And we could, however, support an amended version of the bill that we are offering with in conjunction with the University of Maine system, the Maine Community College system, Maine Maritime Academy, the Maine Coalition to End Domestic Violence, the Maine Coalition on Sexual Assault, and Pine Tree Legal. We've taken the bill and the issues raised very seriously and put a tremendous amount of time into examining these issues and trying to make this bill work. The stakeholder members within MICA met regularly with UMS, MCCS, MMA, and the advocacy groups to do so. Finally, we met on 3 different occasions with the Senate President and the Every Voice Coalition. I know that we at MICA took the words of every voice to heart, which is why we have spent so much time working to come to compromise on this bill, because we understand the importance of serving the needs of our students. We know that sexual assault and interpersonal violence on college campuses is a problem in Maine and a problem nationally, and we want to be proactive partners in this work. We are excited to say that we can support an alternative amendment created in collaboration between Maine higher education institutions and the advocacy groups that have been doing incredible work in Maine for decades. We believe that this amendment will ensure that our student voices continue to be heard and that partnerships are developed or strengthened with the advocacy groups. I know we've attached our campus safety policy working group summary, which has been alluded to, I think, by prior speakers, which states our points of consensus and rationale. Each of our members have spoken to these items of the amendment, but to highlight, primarily we're concerned firstly, with section 12952 requiring institutions to adopt certain policies in coordination with outside organizations, prescribing certain components of that policy. Our policy in this area are largely dictated by federal law, including notices on disciplinary hearings. And this creates too high a risk for a conflict between state and federal law, which has been addressed prior. We have to balance between being compliant with existing law, responsive to student and staff concerns, and ensuring that the policies are easy to understand by layering additional legislation on top of it. It's an already confusing process for students. It doesn't, I think, address what the spirit of the law is intended. Secondly, we have concerns regarding section 12956's provision about confidential resource advisors, as has been noted by speakers already today, specifically mandating institutions to enter into new contracts with employees or outside agencies for a privileged situation that was untenable. Finally, I take my job as Title IX coordinator seriously and view it as a privilege. The success of my efforts in this role is only enhanced and possible because of the work and expertise of the incredible outside agencies like the Maine Coalition to End Domestic Violence, the Maine Coalition on Sexual Assault, and Pine Tree Legal. So I'm extremely excited about the possibilities for partnership with these areas in section 12961, which covers the memorandum of understandings and the support that'll bring to my work. I urge you to consider our proposed amendments, and if accepted, the Maine Independent Colleges Association will be in full support. And I'm happy to answer any questions that folks may have for me this morning.
We do have a question from Senator Woodson, please.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. and thank you for being here. I haven't read your testimony, so I don't know if this is in there or not. Have you expressed or laid out what would, as far as an amendment, okay? Have you laid that out for us to look at and how that would fit in with your policy, the federal policies?
I believe that if it hasn't been provided, it should be provided for workshop. I can defer to the groups that we've been working with. They've worked very long and hard in creating the amendment. I've seen different versions of it. I'm assuming it's been provided. If not, I'll make sure that that happens.
Okay, thank you very much.
Any additional questions at this time, folks? Yes, Representative Dodge.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for being here, and thank you for your work. I know that all of you who are Title IX officers carry a great burden with you that you can't shed at the door when you head home. So thank you. My question is about the earlier testimony from some folks about the complicated process that that a person who experiences a sexual assault encounters as they try to make choices in how they deal with the situation going forward. For the work session, and perhaps you could address briefly here, is there a consistent response across the state of Maine as a person who comes to you for assistance? Here are the 2 pieces of paper. Here is the brochure, along with the verbal counseling that you give. Do we have that consistent policy here in Maine to eliminate the confusion, please? Thank you.
And I can't speak to all the different institutions in Maine, particularly the public system versus a private. I do know that under Title IX, we're required to provide both written and electronic and multiple modalities to provide that information. We have to provide compliance and information training to students and community members as they come into our university community. So we have some annual compliance around communication. I know that when I meet with a student, it's actually pretty simple. They talk to me, I give them I talk to them about the resources available to them, what their obligations are or not, because they're very limited. Mostly if they just need to come tell me that they're needing assistance, and I just provide it for them. I don't need to know the names of individuals. Doesn't need to have happened within a certain frame of time. I just need to know that they're having difficulty accessing their education, and we can work forward from there and provide them connections to advocacy groups, our counseling services, academic supports. So it's a pretty easy one-stop situation. And then we explore what it would mean to go further if they would like to file a formal complaint, which would involve some sort of discipline investigation and that sort of thing. So in some ways it's fairly simple. As it gets more complex is when we go into an investigation or that sort of thing. I know that Title IX is pretty clear on what our resources and our mandates are around that, but it's actually pretty flexible and allows us to be very informal with students and provide them the maximum number of options to help them get what they want, empower them to feel that they're accessing what they need for them individually with their situation, if that helps.
Yes, thank you.
Any additional questions, folks, at this time? Seeing none, thank you very much, Ms. Schambarger. We appreciate you being with us today and for your continued work moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Eli?
Senator Rafferty, I know you're about to jump to Mr. Cohn. We also do have Elizabeth True from Maine Maritime Academy, whose testimony does fall in line with the last few. I know she wasn't on the list that I initially sent you for your information, sir.
Okay, so she is speaking against the LD, correct?
That is correct.
As is Mr. Khan?
Correct.
And the only one that's neither would be Melissa Martin. Is Melissa still in the order?
Yes.
Okay, so, all right, so That was who? I'm sorry, I didn't write it down. So I have
Sorry,
Mr. Khan, and then
And we have Elizabeth True from Maine Maritime Academy.
If you want to switch the orders, I can go after
the
speaker from the Maritime Academy.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate you, your willingness to do so. So if we could, let's bring in Ms. True, and Ms. True will be followed by Mr. Khan. And then we'll go to the neither group, which is Ms. Martin. Thank you.
Good morning, Senator Rafferty, Representative Brennan, and members of the Joint Standing Committee on Education and Cultural Affairs. My name is Dr. Elizabeth True, and I'm providing testimony in opposition to LD 1727, an act concerning sexual misconduct on college campuses on behalf of Maine Maritime Academy, where I serve as the Vice President for Student Affairs and the Title IX Coordinator. I have spent my entire career in higher education advocating for those who are victimized by sexual misconduct and implementing programs and strategies to reduce the incidence of sexual misconduct on campus. I volunteered on a crisis line early in my career and have provided support, guidance, and resolution to too many students who have suffered the trauma of assault or stalking. Each case is painful to hear, and I carry those survivor stories into each prevention training session I facilitate in hopes that I may be able to prevent further trauma for the students in attendance. I'm painfully aware of the combination of factors in the college environment which makes sexual misconduct such an issue for our population. I'm also the parent of a female undergraduate at the university, so this is a very personal issue for me. Maine Maritime Academy is the first service or maritime academy in the country to join the Culture of Respect Coalition. This is a project of the National Association of Student Personnel Administrators, NASPA. The mission of this initiative and coalition is to build the capacity of educational institutions to end sexual violence through ongoing expansive organizational change. Thus, it seems incongruous that I'm writing this statement and opposing an act which aims to reduce the incidence of sexual misconduct on campus and improve prevention response efforts. I need to be explicitly clear that Maine Maritime Academy shares the goals of the Senate President and the Every Voice Coalition to improve safety on campus and to improve survivors' access to support and services. However, our concern is how this goal would be accomplished. We believe that there will be problematic aspects of the bill and that it may confuse survivors, divert critical resources, and bifurcate the reporting process. MMA joined the Culture of Respect Collective in 2020 when it became clear that our students were generally unaware of the many resources available to them on and off campus. In joining the collective, we gained access to the best practices and research to help us eliminate incidents of sexual violence and harassment on our campus. In our meeting with the Senate President's staff and the representatives from Every Voice, we heard the same concern about lack of information voiced by the student representatives. Our priority at MMA has been to increase awareness and to make it easier and less stressful for students to seek resources. In fact, this morning, while not on the Zoom hearing, I'm facilitating a training for 7 colleagues who have volunteered to serve as Title IX advocates on our campus. These advocates are in roles across the campus and were carefully recruited because of their positions, visibility, and reputation for student advocacy. Yet another priority has been providing students and employees with information about the many free local resources in our community who can provide counseling, advocacy, and legal aid. After working in higher education in 3 other states, I continue to be amazed by the unique system of community supports funded by the Maine legislature to support survivors of sexual assault, domestic violence, and stalking. As my colleagues from the humane system and the community colleges have eloquently described, we have concerns with the bill that are outlined in my written testimony. I won't waste time here reiterating what others have said so eloquently. We support several sections of the bill as we've already embarked on similar initiatives prompted by our work with the Culture of Respect Collective. These include the sections regarding climate surveys, the immunity policy, MOUs with community agencies, and reporting. However, our concerns with the bill focus on the sections which will contradict and undermine existing policies and resources and further confuse students and employees in needs of support. These sections, while well-intentioned, may conflict with federal laws, create administrative burdens that will divert time and attention away from direct student support, and further complicate the reporting and support process. We share the concerns of every voice that the current federal Title IX regulations do not adequately address the needs of survivors of sexual misconduct. However, trying to contravene these regulations with further complications from a state law will not accomplish the goals to improve prevention and response to sexual violence. And new guidance from the Office of Civil Rights is promised by May of this year, and it seems prudent to wait until this guidance is published before developing state legislation that might no longer be necessary. The mandatory requirement to hire a confidential resource advisor is the most troubling section of the bill. As my colleagues have described the multitude of concerns with this section of the bill, I won't waste your time reiterating these points, but they are included in my written testimony. Likewise, we share the concerns about creating a new set of policies and definitions. And I want to highlight a key point. Most of the survivors I speak with who file a formal complaint often seek a resolution where their assailant is held accountable for their actions. Adding new policies, roles, and definitions will provide new opportunities for errors to occur in the adjudication process, which might result in a successful appeal by the alleged perpetrator based on procedural errors, and that will not meet the needs and goals of those survivors who've gone through the trouble of filing a formal complaint. In conclusion, an overarching concern shared by my colleagues is that the bill implies that the institutions of higher education in Maine do not already have in place policies and programs to prevent and respond to incidents of sexual misconduct. Not only do we fully comply with the requirements of the Violence Against Women Act and the Title IX regulations, but we continue to prohibit incidents of sexual assault, intimate partner violence, and stalking, which don't fall under the criteria established in the 2020 Title IX regulations. And we've done this through our honor code. We are fully committed to eliminating sexual violence on campus. While the aim of this bill is to help students and employees more easily access services, the administrative burden, the additional policies, and the other requirements may actually make the process of accessing resources and services more complicated. We are grateful that the Senate President is focusing his attention on this critical issue, and we commend the work of every voice in advocating for change, especially in states which do not have the structures and resources that Maine is fortunate to have to support survivors. As so many have stated, the commitment, bravery, and perseverance of the students involved in every voice is inspirational. And we look forward to working with you, every voice, and the Senate President on solutions that work for our state to accomplish our shared goals. I'm ready to answer any questions and pleased to make experts on this topic, as well as the information already requested, available for work sessions so we can create a solution that meets all of our goals while addressing our concerns with the current bill. Thank you.
Folks, any questions of Ms. True at this time? Yes, Representative Dodge.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Ms. True, for being here this morning. I have two questions. One is, are you perceiving any disadvantage for your students who experience sexual violence because you are more rural than some of our other campuses? That's my first question.
That's an important question. And unfortunately, access, for example, for medical attention with a properly trained nurse requires that we go at least almost an hour from campus. But we have made it clear that we will provide transportation for that if desired, but it is difficult if somebody wants to go confidentially. But we've also made it clear that the off-campus resources will help with that as well. I think that the rural piece, we have access because of where we are located. We do have counselors on campus and so forth. And actually now, post-pandemic, the remote access to many services does help. So it's not, for some students, actually, they prefer that. So we're compensating for that, but it is a challenge. Another challenge for us is the very small size of our campus. If you make a report on a campus of 12,000 people, it's easier to be within that group, but it is challenging with a campus under 1,000.
Thank you. And a follow-up, if I may, Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Thank you. And my second question is around the possible differentiation that occurs between those students at MMA who go regimental and those students who do not. And the military honor code, is that something that plays in here at all? Thank you.
Well, our honor code actually applies to all of our students. There is a regimental manual, but this would fall under We have students who are independent, as you mentioned, or in the regiment, and this type of offense would come under the honor code and wouldn't be pursued through the regimental channels. So we have very specific, so all students would be subject to the same resources and the same judicial process. Thank you.
Any additional questions? Ms. True, I'm not sure this question has been asked specifically. So for our work session, can you collectively, maybe with the other educational sources, give us some information as to what happens to the perpetrators? You know, some of those common things that, most common things that are going to happen to the perpetrator. And then also, is it most common that the systems provide in-house counseling for victims? Or does most of that counseling take place outside of the school itself?
Well, first, I can only tell you about the cases that are reported, and as we've described before, we know that many cases are not reported, and I certainly hope that through the materials that we plaster all over campus, students are finding access, and I think they are, to some of the resources who've already spoken today, such as Mikasa. But in most cases, our students prefer to talk to one of our counselors. Again, we can make a referral to an outside counselor if they wish, and because we require student insurance, that is covered by counseling services required by student insurance and so forth. So they're able to access that with a very small out-of-pocket, but most do prefer to do it on campus so they can completely avoid that whole process. And so I think that's the case in most cases. In terms of what happens to the perpetrators, we certainly can share that. And we all have different honor codes and judicial processes. And in our case, there can be, if the student is found responsible for the violation of our sexual misconduct policies, the sanctions can range. Sometimes we can do an informal resolution process if both parties agree. And that is an agreement between the two parties to what we call remediate the effects of the assault. If it goes through the judicial process to the honor board, the sanctions could range from suspension to dismissal, depending on whether the perpetrator is found responsible.
Thank you very much. Folks, any additional questions at this time? Seeing none, thank you, Ms. True, for being here today. Thank you for your testimony and your expertise. Have a great afternoon. Next up is going to be Joe Kahn, and Joe will be the last speaker against the LD. And we have one additional person coming on to speak neither for nor against. Mr. Kahn, thank you for your patience.
Co-Chairman Rafferty, members of the committee, thank you so much for this really good discussion of this really important issue. I'm coming to you today from a hotel room in South Carolina where I have another hearing in about 40 minutes. And I apologize for the internet connection here. It's been going in and out during the hearing. So if you drop me, I apologize in advance. My name is Joe Kahn. I'm from the Foundation for Individual Rights in Education, or as we're better known, FIRE. We are a national nonpartisan nonprofit organization dedicated to free speech and due process for university students and faculty. And our role in this conversation is about the due process aspects of campus sex assault. And my comments, I'm going to try to keep them pretty general, but we'll probably focus in on a couple provisions as well from a different perspective than you've heard so far today. Just to say that a good chunk of this bill isn't all that controversial, could be incrementally helpful. Some of it is duplicative of what's already in existing law, and I don't view those kind of duplications as being problems per se, but there are kind of global issues that I want to bring your attention to. Some of them were touched upon by Ms. True right before me, so it actually turns out fortuitous that she testified before me. And what I want to focus on that is there are tensions here between some of the due process obligations, and that ultimately also will not help complainants. And she made that case, and I want to flesh that out a little bit for you. I think it's pretty well established. There are people who are victims of sexual misconduct, and there are also people who are wrongly accused, and neither one of those are mythical unicorns. So anytime you're crafting policy, you need to be very careful to be mindful of the rights of all of the people involved. And what I'll say is, of all the stakeholders that have been consulted so far that you've heard, none of them have had a focus on due process. And when you look at the list of the panel you're going to set up that's going to set up your policy, you have 20 members. None of them focus on due process. You had, I think it was Ms. Smith before us, but it might have been another one of the witnesses, I apologize if I got this wrong, who talked about how the resources go almost unilaterally one direction, even though respondents also could very much benefit from having help navigating the system, having help dealing with psychological services, and all of these other kind of things. These are easy problems to solve in the bill. So you can do that pretty easily. But the main thing I want you to think about is that if you do have a bill that crosses the finish line and gets signed into by the governor and only provides resources one way, that includes provisions like providing trauma-informed training to the adjudicators, which is different than providing trauma-informed training to first responders, and I'll talk about that in a moment, you are giving a silver platter hook, for counsel to talk about how the process was biased to begin with. No matter whether or not you say it should be impartial in the bill, if you are telling adjudicators that they should be trained that that any inconsistencies in a complainant story are more likely to be the result of trauma, then you have built in bias into the process. That same training may be entirely uncontroversial to first responders, who you do want to know how to engage with complainants more sensitively in a way that doesn't discourage people from coming forward in the first place. So there is just one kind of concrete example of a way that you could be setting up the schools for failure. And that's happened across the country. In the last 8 years, there have been over 150 rulings against schools, presided over by judges, nominated by presidents of both parties, confirmed by senates of both parties, with a universal theme that you can't cut corners on the due process end. Thankfully, much of this bill doesn't deal with that. A couple areas do. You give schools permission to use what we call the potted plant rule with counsel. They can be there, but you can require them to just be silent, and the schools can give any restrictions that they want. I mean, the schools are in favor of that provision because that does lead to less, in my view, accountability in these procedures. But I want to emphasize, counsel should be able to actively participate for both the complainant and the accused, because even when you have a Title IX coordinator in a school that's trying to do the exact right thing, so not someone who's trying to permeate the process with their bias, but is trying to do the right thing, they may not have the same kind of priorities as either one of the parties have, or recognize the importance of particular evidence, may not argue it the same way, and having someone in the process who answers only to you who can participate is really an essential right that this bill undermines with its provision on being able to limit advisors. You have sections, and I'm not going to go line by line in it, but you talk about confidentiality at one point, and you don't make clear that it is the school's obligation to uphold the confidentiality and that it can't be a gag order on the students from talking about what is happening to themselves. So you can clarify who that applies to in ways that can ease and erase very foreseeable legal issues. And then lastly, the last thing I want to talk about before yielding to any questions that you have is this conversation that I've seen go back and forth between the proponents and the opponents about confidential resources. I'd like to hear from both sides to kind of sort through that a little bit more. And afterwards, if any of the witnesses want to reach out to me, I could be reached at joe@thefire.org. But our feeling is, just generally 10,000 foot on this, is that problems we've seen in other states have involved not actively providing privilege to the people who you tell students they can go to confidentially. Like, you tell them you can go to these people confidentially, but they don't actually have the legal privilege. And that is to some extent what the people who are opposing the bill are pointing out. This bill is trying to fix that by actively providing that legal privilege, right? So I'm interested in hearing more from them about why they think the language in the bill is inadequate to provide that legal privilege, because I agree that it is a problem, but I don't know that the language doesn't solve it. I think they identify a problem, but I think your language comes close to solving the problem that they're identifying. And I could be persuaded otherwise if I hear more, but that's the tension here. Are you actually delivering on the promise that you give to students in terms of where and when they're going to get confidentiality? Opposition is telling you, no, you can't actually fulfill that promise under federal law. And, you know, I'm sensitive to that concern, but I'm not sure I agree with their conclusion. But it's worth really doing a deep dive into because you want to get that right. So the last thing I'll just say is that I appreciate you having me here. I think the penalty provision is probably unhelpful, particularly if your procedures are one-sided. If you have a penalty that only, you know, that you must follow through on rights, the rights only exist for people on one side, and there's a penalty if you don't. That gives another due process argument that can be provided as well. It's unnecessary given Title IX's already existing penalty provisions and the ability under Title IX for litigants to bring private lawsuits to enforce their rights as well. So I would encourage you to cut that provision too. And that is, you know, the general nature of my testimony. I'm not thrilled with the affirmative consent being in the definitions section because I think that poses due process problems as well, but I don't want to take up more of your time to delve deeper into it unless you want me to. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. I do have a question from Senator Woodson.
Thank you. Mr. Cohen, are you going to be available for the workshop?
I don't have my calendar set, but I'll make myself available to you however I possibly can, subject to making sure that I don't have a conflict. It is a top priority for us to help you through whatever you need, and to talk to as many of the proponents and opponents as possible to iron out, you know, any differences in advance, again, if they want to reach out to me.
Okay,
there's a lot of good stuff in here too.
Thank you.
Sure, you mentioned earlier, I didn't write it down fast enough. So should one of us be interested in reaching out to you, we would best do so how?
joe@thefire.org. And I check my email constantly unless I'm in a hearing. You know, glued to our devices, unfortunately, and I'm not immune to it. But I am looking forward to helping you all, you know, through this. If you are intent on having policies that do deal with how the adjudications will go, then I would urge you to include more robust due process protections that are here. So for example, your provision says that students are entitled to the evidence schools plan to use. Well, federal law requires them to give access to the evidence that the school has in its possession unless it's privileged. And the reason for that is if a school doesn't plan on using exculpatory evidence, they wouldn't have to turn it over under your language. They only have to use the language they plan to use to make their case under your language. So that's a mistake. So if you cut, as some of the advocates have asked, any of the requirements dealing with the policies and procedures, then I won't be asking you to add more procedural protections in this bill. But if you do keep your toe in these waters, then I would ask for a more robust conversation about making the procedures actually balanced.
Thank you, sir. Any other questions, folks? Yes, Representative Dodge.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I am not exactly certain how I should phrase this, so I'll just plow ahead. How many lawyers is it going to take to get to a good finished product that will represent the concerns of the universities, the aspects that have just been addressed through Mr. Cohn's organization, and the legal advisor of the people who brought this bill forward, working with our analyst, Ms. Ressler. I obviously don't know the answer to that question, but will we have access to at least 4 legal experts in addition to our analyst to help us suss this out, please? Thank you.
Well, the precise answer is 42. No, I'm kidding. I don't know exactly how many lawyers it will take, but you will have full access to my office. I'm sure all the victims' rights organizations would be thrilled to participate. They've been working really hard for 2 years, and the bill shows that. And I would be shocked if the universities weren't interested in doing it as well. These things are really complex because there are a lot of competing interests, and there are a lot of interests that are slightly overlapping but not entirely overlapping. Getting this right, I think, the one thing I like to remind people is, I like to think it through. The principle that should guide every legislator in dealing with this is, imagine you have a constituent that has a son and a daughter, twins, both in college. One of them is accused and one of them is victimized, in short succession. And you want to make sure your policy does justice by both of them, and doesn't cut corners on what either of them need. So the memorandums of understanding are really, helpful, but you also have like waivers of fees for accessing resources for only one side, like in your bill. So,
yes.
Does that meet that test and standard? I don't think so. I think that we're happy to dedicate as many resources as you need. If any of the bill sponsors or the committee reaches out to us, we'll set up as many calls, review as much language, send as much red lines as you need, and engage with anyone else in calls who want.
Thank you. And a follow-up, if I may, Mr. Chair, to you or to Ms. Rissler, please.
Yes, go ahead.
Should we also have someone from the Attorney General's office weigh in on this, perhaps after you folks all do something preliminarily? And I'm going to mute myself because that's the end of that question. But I know that Ms. Rissler, I have utmost faith in you handling this in an appropriate and balanced way. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions, folks? Sir, thank you so much for being with us. Your patience, first of all, but your expertise is certainly evident, and your willingness to continue to work with us is an awesome offer, and I hope that some folks are able to take you up on that.
Thank you. It's my honor, and it's to the other witnesses as well. Have a good one.
Thank you. Folks, we have a good day, sir. We have no additional testimony against. We do have a person that's here to speak neither for nor against, and that is Melissa Martin.
Morning. Good morning, Senator Rafferty and members of the Committee on Education and Cultural Affairs. My name is Melissa Martin, and I am a staff attorney at Pine Tree Legal Assistance in the Family Law and Victim Rights Unit. That means that the vast majority of my clients are domestic violence and sexual assault survivors, and I work providing them holistic representation on everything from protection from abuse cases to representation in Title IX proceedings. I just want to make clear right off the bat that Pine Tree Legal Assistance is 100% aligned with the point of view of MCEDV and MICASA as outlined in the chart that's attached to Elizabeth Ward Saxel's testimony in sort of the breakdown of the sections we support or oppose. And I want to talk a little bit about particularly some of the issues with policies. I think you've heard a lot about confidential resource advisors, and I want to give you some specific examples about policies and some of our concerns about that section. To give you a little bit of background, and I think you've heard this from a few other people who have testified in front of you today, but many instances of sexual misconduct on campuses are currently investigated pursuant to a school's Title IX policy. It's important to realize that Title IX law is pretty complicated. It is comprised of a complex body of federal case law, federal regulations, and then Department of Education guidance. And those pieces sort of all need to be read together for anyone, including attorneys, to understand what a school's obligations are under Title IX to their student body. In August of 2020, a new set of Title IX regulations went into effect, and this really altered the landscape of Title IX. Overall, advocates for student survivors saw that many of these changes were not favorable to student survivors of sexual assault. And as you heard, there is it's very likely that the federal guidance is going to change. So giving you all advice and testifying about this is a little bit tricky because we have, number one, the current status of federal law. And then in a way, we need to look into a crystal ball and hope to imagine what federal law might be 6 months from now. And that could be very different. Of course, we don't actually have that crystal ball. We can't tell you exactly what federal law is going to look like. And this is why I think thinking about ways that the 1727, if implemented in Maine, might conflict with federal law is really important. And I want to give you two specific examples to highlight where I think the current 1727 is in conflict with the current federal law and why I think that would be bad for survivors. So the first part is in I'm looking at section 12952 in the current 1727, and I'm particularly looking at the contents of the policy, which is subsection 3, and then subsection A within that. And I'm going to read it to you because I know I just gave you a lot of numbers, but one of the parts of this bill is to ask that procedures about sexual misconduct be investigated regardless of where the alleged incident occurred. This is different than what federal law says. So in August of 2020, when federal law was changed, they really limited what schools were obligated to investigate pursuant to Title IX. So, and I've in my written testimony actually outlined the really specific rules about where alleged sexual misconduct would have to happen so that schools would be obligated under Title IX to investigate that. So current 1727 says, regardless of where the incident occurred. Well, that means now we have two procedures, right? We have one procedure under Title IX if your incident occurred, on campus or in certain off-campus buildings. But if it doesn't fall within Title IX, you might still be covered by 1727. What if there were multiple incidents? Is the school going to conduct multiple investigations, one pursuant to Title IX and one pursuant to 1727? I think it could be read that way, and I'm worried that there would be that there will end up being multiple investigations done to comply with Title IX on one hand, and then LD 1727 if enacted the way it's currently drafted. This could be really bad. We know that survivors of sexual assault are already often involved in multiple proceedings. It is not infrequent that I am representing a student survivor who is choosing to file a Title IX complaint, but they're also moving forward with a civil protection order in court, and they're also moving forward with a criminal complaint. This is overwhelming because you are talking about dealing with law enforcement officials, the prosecutor's office, a victim witness advocate for the criminal side, dealing with a court date and an advocate and an attorney for your civil protection order, and then also dealing with the Title IX coordinator, the Title IX investigator, your advisor, or your representative in the Title IX case. That's a lot of people to keep track of. And so to the extent that we are thinking about putting a law in place that might create yet another procedure that students have to go through, one of our concerns is that that makes reporting even more onerous. We already know that there are so many students who are reluctant to report. If there's a possibility that they are going to have to go through multiple in-school proceedings, I think that that would prevent them from reporting to an even greater degree. Another specific example I want to give you, in the same contents of the policy section in subsection G1, the language says, the procedure must be uniformly applied to all disciplinary proceedings related to any claims of sexual violence, intimate partner violence, or stalking. I think this also directly conflicts with federal law. And although I talked about, a lot of the changes of Title IX being not beneficial to survivors, there is one part of it that I think is really helpful. Right now in federal Title IX law, when a student chooses to report, they have two options that they can go down. And you heard about this a little bit from some of the people who testified at schools. They can go to an informal procedure where they can try to negotiate through their advisors a resolution that feels equitable and just and addresses their needs, or they can choose to go the formal process. And there are a lot of reasons why students choose not to go the formal process. A Title IX investigation is onerous. It involves, being interviewed multiple times, often having your friends interviewed. This process can, schools do try to make it go quickly. However, you are talking about probably something close to the length of a school semester, with that distraction hanging over your head while trying to complete coursework and continue to move on with your life. So there are a lot of valid reasons why students choose not to move forward with the formal process. And one of the good things about federal Title IX law right now is it allows this alternative of an informal process, which can often be a lot faster. And this seems, the way that LD 1727 is written right now seems to say all procedures need to be handled in this formal way. And to me, that takes away survivor agency and doesn't allow survivors to sort of choose to have a more informal process. So those are just two specific examples of language that we think could be problematic and have these negative unintended consequences for survivors. And it's why we've proposed, taking out many of those policy sections because of the conflict with current law, and then also just the potential to conflict with future federal law. I'm also a little bit in the awkward position of needing to toot my own horn and talk about what a great resource Pine Tree Legal Assistance is, but I'm going to do that. So we get connected with a lot of student survivors through the domestic violence and sexual assault agencies. We have an incredibly strong relationship with those agencies. And so this is why I think, the MOU portion is really important because it's going to connect more survivors to the amazing services at the sexual assault and domestic violence agencies, and also to civil legal providers. And I hate to say this, I'm coming from the point of view of an attorney saying it's really important to have an attorney, but I think that's true. And I'm thinking about a current Title IX case that I'm working on. And we're not even, through the formal investigation process, but in representing the student, I was able to find out that because she was on a leave of absence from school while this investigation is happening, her school health insurance, which would normally be covered, she was a scholarship student, had been taken away because she was on a leave of absence. And the Title IX office doesn't talk to, the other offices. In fact, they're not going to unless they need to. So they didn't know why she was on a leave of absence. They don't know it's connected to a Title IX case. Her health insurance was pulled. She's in pretty intensive therapy. So she accrued a huge amount of medical debt and bills in seeking medical treatment because of the sexual assault. We were able to negotiate to get her insurance reinstated and get her counseling fees covered. I don't know that she would have thought to ask about this. It's something because I've represented a lot of survivors, and you heard a lot of the student survivors talk about the incredible financial burden. And so this is something in my conversations with her: how are things going in therapy? How are you paying for it? Oh, you lost your health insurance. Okay, this is something we can ask for. It's something we can ask for even before the resolution of the Title IX case. And, it is a little bit giving a benefit. Obviously, I'm representing her. Her needs come first, but I am able to have a really productive relationship with the school. And they were happy to cover those costs, but they may not have even known that those existed, and she may not have thought to ask for them without having that legal representation. And so I do think, me representing someone, I can make the process a little less confusing. I can't usually make it faster. There are limits to what I'm able to do, but I do think having the opportunity to have an attorney representing you at each stage who can properly advise you, not just about what's happening at the school, but when you are getting into, are you making a criminal complaint? What does that look like? Do you need to file a civil protection order? What does that look like? To have one person that you can go to who is able to provide you. And as an attorney, I know conversations with me are privileged, right? So we don't have, a lot of the issues that we're talking about with some of the other people that you may be reporting to. Her conversations with me are totally confidential, totally privileged, and I can talk to her about the whole array of options. And so I do think, you know, to the extent that we can get more survivors to be able to talk to attorneys, particularly, you know, at our organization, you know, we're not just out to sort of create, you know, more litigation. We really are looking at things from a survivor lens. This is what the other attorneys in my unit do full time. And we want to give all the options we can to survivors. So I just want to say that, you know, I think the provisions of the law that we support are going to give us a really important way to look statewide at what specifically our gaps are in Maine by having this commission, by having surveys that will allow us to drill down on, okay, we're not saying that what we're doing in Maine is working perfectly right now. I think in some ways we are a lot further along than other states, but where are our gaps and what do we need to do? And so I really encourage you to pass a more limited version of the bill, the one that's sort of outlined in the chart, because this is more in line with what several other states have done, such as Connecticut and New Mexico, Nevada, Illinois, Pennsylvania, Arizona. All of these states have sort of passed legislation that does portions of what's proposed in 1727, but not everything. And I think that's going to allow a more thoughtful approach going forward to really look at what specifically is happening in Maine and to more specifically address that. I'm happy to take any questions at this time. I'm happy to be available for the work session as one of the attorneys, and I think you're going to have other attorneys available too, Andrea Mancuso. And although Elizabeth's not an attorney and she says that all the time, she's an incredibly great resource, and it sounds like some of the schools are going to have their attorneys available. So I think you'll have plenty of attorneys available at the work session, but I'm also happy to take questions at this time.
Thank you very much, Ms. Martin. Any questions, folks, of Ms. Martin at this time? And I'll have one. Just, I know that you've mentioned the chart, and I'm guessing this is the chart that's going to kind of guide us in terms of what provisions that different sides support, and also the gaps that continue to exist. So is there anything, there's no other chart, that's the one we're referring to?
There's one chart, yeah, which was created by Mikasa to sort of bring in that so that you could understand where everyone stood. And I believe the plan is to have an actual statutory language to you by the end of the week that all of the schools and the victim service agencies can agree on. So I believe you will have that, and hopefully nobody is mad at me that I'm promising this end of the week deadline, but I know that's the goal.
Well, we know that goal exists because the end of the week is supposed to be the, you know, we're supposed to finish, but certainly something to this magnitude, you know, not that I can extend it, but there are powers to be that could extend us a little bit more time if needed. So, but thank you very much. Any other questions, folks? Ms. Martin, we appreciate you being with us today and your testimony as well as your expertise. Thank you very much for the work you're doing. You have a good day.
Thank you.
So Eli, I believe that concludes all of our testimony and speakers.
From my perspective, sir, that is everyone. Yes.
Thank you. So I will call the public hearing on LD 1727 to a close. And at this time, would like to thank the committee for their work. Appreciate all we've done together today. Representative Dodge, you have a question?
Yes, please, if I may, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Thank you. My question is for Ms. Risler for our work session and for her report that she will give us. Have you, Ms. Risler, given any thought to using the chart that has been provided by Ms. Saxel as the basis for your report, if you feel that will help our understanding, please?
So I think, yes. So I think what I'll do for this bill, similar to some of the other larger complicated bills where there is some support for parts and opposition for parts, is I'll focus my bill analysis on the summary of testimony, specifically and less on, for or against, and more on here are the areas that there seem to be agreement, here are the areas that still seem to be outstanding or areas of concern. And hopefully that can guide the discussion. And that chart was provided to you by Mikasa. I'm sure that will be helpful for me as well. But I'll need to read it more in depth, as I'm sure you do as well.
Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other questions, folks? So we will be in session tomorrow. And with any luck, we hope that I bump into some of you and have an opportunity to chat a little bit. Yes, Ms. Rizla.
I just wanted to mention I'm about to send out that email to the committee with an overview of the anticipated schedule for next week. Your chairs have submitted will have submitted within 5 minutes that request to the presiding officers regarding an extension of the deadline. The anticipated schedule assumes that that will be granted. Obviously, if for some reason it isn't, you'll be getting some frantic emails from me letting you know. But otherwise, unless you hear otherwise, we'll plan to work this bill next Monday, the 14th.
Thank you very much. Any other questions, folks? Seeing none, folks, again, thank you for your work today. You have a great afternoon, and we will hopefully see you all tomorrow. Thank you.